Please welcome Ann Armstrong.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Can I get the panelists to come on up? Thank you all for hanging in after what has been a long and exciting day. Really appreciate it, and I certainly appreciate the folks who have come this afternoon to share their ideas and impressions with us. In the middle, in the light green dress, we have Colleen Coggins. She's the Chief Information Officer at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and is a member of the board of ACT. A woman of many talents, she can run the Cash for Clunkers program or head up the interagency group of enterprise architects. Next to her on this side is Todd Graham, Executive in Charge for the Office of Management and the Chief Financial Officer at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Graham's is something of a Renaissance man. He has worked for 5 different agencies in such diverse areas as finance, IT, performance management, enterprise risk management, budget, and human resources. That pretty well covers everything. And on top of that, he's a kayaker. So if you see a red kayak out on the Potomac, might be his. Carlene Elito is the Executive Director of Enterprise Business Management Office at the Department of Homeland Security. As is often the case with mathematicians, she is also a musician. She is a talented singer as well as a pianist and a flutist. And she has a daughter who is a TV reporter for a station in Baltimore, so she knows how to handle journalists. Bernie Mazur is the CIO of the Department of Interior with oversight of $1 billion in an IT portfolio. He has extensive experience with public-private partnerships in telecommunications and IT around the world. In fact, he has lived and worked in 35 countries so far. Ann Rung, last but definitely not least, is Senior Advisor to the Administrator and Chief Acquisition Officer at the General Services Administration. She comes to that role from the Department of Commerce and the state of Pennsylvania. She exhibited a willingness to try new approaches and take risks early in her career. She played Snow White in her 2nd grade production. So now that you have a sense of the breadth and the experience that we have here today, I'm going to lead some questions. I'm going to direct some to them, but we definitely want to include the audience, so we will try to make this interactive and get you all involved. It's not a smackdown, but a little bit closer than maybe usual. Is this on? Can I get this so I can move around? I'm not doing a full Dorbeck, but a partial Dorbeck, for those of you who know how Chris Dorbeck works. So this is, after all, a small business conference, and the emphasis is on business, and business means money, and I think we cannot talk about small business without at least talking about the budget environment. And so, Bernie, can I direct to you? Can you give us a general comment on what you think the current budget situation is, how it affects small business at your agency?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I think earlier this morning you might have heard about what the possibilities of sequestration are, and about the austerity of our budget climate. I tend to be an optimist in that, in terms of the absence of money, kind of compels us to really think in a way in different manners. In the context of small businesses, while there might be some contraction of general types of services, is that contraction vis-a-vis the relationship that the Department of the Interior has with small businesses will still stay the same. Within the Department of Interior, you probably will note we really don't have any big dogs in terms of large megalithic types of contracts. We do have agency goals. We've exceeded our agency goals of 51%. We're up to 57% now. Even within the world I inhabit, right, of information technology, is we always look invariably with partnering with small businesses on where we are. So even though while overall there might be real terms declines in terms of our contracting opportunities that are pursued, the percentages and all that and our commitment to small businesses will still stay there. And I could probably even very well see some of the percentages increasing in terms of what our goals are.
Interesting. Great. Colleen, did you want to address do you want to add anything to that? Or?
Certainly. It's important from an IT perspective, information technology perspective, to understand that with the budget cuts that we have, it's going across the board. And DHS is certainly not privy to being excluded to those budget cuts. And so with the savings that we're starting to look at, we're driving to do more things that will really provide significant efficiencies across the IT community within DHS. So for us, it would be more consolidation efforts, it would be more integration efforts, and standardization efforts for us. And in doing so, it's really important for our small business partners that are going to be interested in at least identifying certain products that would help us to achieve those efficiencies, to know and understand the business in which we are in so that they can help us to actually obtain those.
Okay. Thank you. Although there are a lot of bright spots in small business contracting, there's certainly been some challenges as well. I mean, the 51% is pretty impressive, and I think EPA is like 42 or something like that. But the government as a whole is sort of struggling to get to its numbers. In January of this year, the president, for the first time, tied incentives to the meeting of those goals, specifically executive bonus incentives. I was wondering, Todd, if you could comment on this incentive approach and whether there's some other ideas floating around that would help the government as a whole reach the small business goal.
Sure, be glad to. First off, you asked about the incentives. I think anytime you can set up a connection between incentives, in this case pay, and outcomes, that's a good thing. It should help people move into the right direction in general. Looking at what else might be out there and focusing on what we've tried to do with the Department of Veterans Affairs, I think first and foremost is leadership support. That is leadership of the department or the agency making the small business goal a priority. And I think you almost need that to achieve any big goals in government. At the VA, it has a special connection to our mission because we're concerned about veteran-owned small businesses and service-disabled veteran-owned businesses. So that small business goal to us is actually very close to the heart of our mission, which is to care for our nation's veterans. We do that by providing services and benefits, but we also do that by making sure we hit our small business goals as well as our goals for veteran-owned businesses. When I first got to the VA and I started looking at the numbers, including the small business goals, the first thing I thought was that small business at the VA is big business. Our goal for this year is $7 billion with a B for small business contracts and procurement. Put $7 billion in context, that's the size of Winn-Dixie. That's the revenue of Weyerhaeuser in a year. It's almost the size of the entire Department of Commerce. So at the VA, we take it seriously, and it is a big part of what we do. Adding to that leadership support and how it's tied into our mission, we have monthly performance reviews at the VA where we sit with the Deputy Secretary and I, sit with the senior team, and we go through a balanced scorecard of metrics. Several of the metrics within our operational quadrant of the balanced scorecard actually deal with our small business goals. So we track it every month. And if we're above, that's fine. If we start to go below, we start talking about what can be done across the department to make sure that folks are sticking to their plans and that we're going to hit or exceed the goal by the end of the year.
Great, thank you.
Hey, Ann,
Yeah.
if I could just jump in for a minute.
Absolutely.
I think,
Everybody should feel free to jump in if somebody says something you want to add to or comment on.
Sure. I mean, you know, you would ask what's one of the biggest challenges across government, and we have sort of a GSA unique perspective because I and our acting administrator came in about a year ago and started with a pretty extensive top-to-bottom review, and it became clear that there was this incredible duplication of support services across our agency, and it's not uncommon in every federal agency. It was typical at Commerce as well. And I think that makes it incredibly challenging for all the vendors trying to do business with us, that we're so fragmented and duplicative across government. And it's incredibly challenging for any organization to drive change and to meet its targets when you're not structured for success. So, you know, as a result of this top-to-bottom review, at GSA, it did reveal that we had this duplication of HR and IT and CIO functions across our agency in the regions and the headquarters. So we're in the middle of this massive consolidation of all those services. So we can have greater accountability, transparency, be more efficient, but I think also to make it easier for our customers to do business with us. But that is a challenge across government that I'm sure all of you who've ever done business in the federal government can relate to.
Well, let's follow up on some of the challenges. And Colleen, maybe you could lead us off. Beyond the budgeting challenge, what do you see as some of the key challenges and opportunities facing? We have quite a breadth of different skill sets here in different jobs, and this is the CXO challenge. So could you lead us off in what you see some of the challenges are for the CXOs in today's world?
Sure. Well, let me first address the opportunity space. Thanks to this administration's focus on transparency and open government, and of course with the publication of the digital government strategy, there is an enormous opportunity space for innovative solutions that leverage federal data. And we saw the first wave of this, of course, with agencies releasing their data in non-proprietary open format. And the second wave of this, we see agencies releasing application program interfaces or APIs to our data. And this is huge for particularly the small business community, where you guys are nimble. You can look at the opportunities out there for leveraging our information, not only vertically within one agency, but mashups across other agencies. Here within NHTSA, we have recently released 4 application program interfaces to 4 high-value data sets. Our vehicle recall information, we've released an API to our 5-star safety standards for vehicles, also to our consumer complaint information, which we receive about 40,000 submissions from the public annually, and also to our child safety seat locator inspection locations throughout the United States. Now, we have released our version of our mobile app, but again, the market out there for innovative solutions is huge, and this is an area where you don't need legions of resources or developers to produce something that is just beneficial to the general public or specific vertical industries that I think is really a niche market for small businesses. Conversely, on the challenge side, I would say that cybersecurity continues to be an ongoing challenge within the federal government. And if I were to pick 2 areas where I think small businesses can provide support, those would be in continuous monitoring and also in terms of getting our numbers up for logical PIV access. So on the continuous monitoring part, Definitely, we want an independent arm to come in and look at our systems and really give us an outside perspective in terms of the security controls that we have in place, how effective they are, look at vulnerabilities that perhaps our host provider or our contractors who are administering our systems have overlooked. So a fresh set of eyes, if you will, is always a good thing from a security perspective. And then lastly, with PIV enabling our system, so as we're trying to increase logical access, there is a huge workload associated with PIV enabling our custom developed mission critical systems. So again, I think those are two niche areas that are very conducive to small business work.
Okay. Ann?
At GSA, you know, we all recognize on this panel that the current budget climate is not going away anytime in the foreseeable future. And so at GSA, we very much believe that our role becomes more important because our reach is far beyond our agency, it's government-wide. And we are, for many areas, the shared services center for real estate, for acquisitions, for travel, for fleet. And that was what we were designed to do. And so we support the agencies. And we see this as an opportunity to create even more common platforms across government to decrease duplication of effort as budgets are tighter. And you know, we have a very firm commitment to increase small business participation through our contracting vehicles. And as a result of this top-to-bottom review, we came out with 6 new priorities, one of which is to increase small business participation. It's not sitting on a piece of paper somewhere. It's going to be built into everyone's performance plans, trickling down throughout the agency. And so as we build more and more of these common platforms and strive to have more agencies use us to deliver better value, we are concurrently driving to increase small business participation in those vehicles.
Okay.
And I'd like to just a quick nod in terms of the challenges that we are facing under the aegis of the body that we're talking with. As you know, we are going to have the budgetary challenges. They are going to maybe slow down some of the rapidity of initiatives that we're trying to perform. But one of the challenges that we're looking at, like within the Department of Interior, is we're looking at delivering services from an enterprise perspective. And then when we look at delivering services from an enterprise perspective, a lot of it has to deal with the ability of a company for scalability in order to be able to provide services for 72,000 employees plus a couple 100,000 volunteers, and then whomever we act with from the NGO or the PVO community. So we're on this constant search or trying to find venues and all that is where we might have requirements that we need, and then where can we find those, whether they're through the hub zone or through service disabled veterans or through small disadvantaged businesses and the like. So these venues, like I'm grateful for Marietta being one of the workers behind this great session, is how can we make these particular contacts. I sat in a breakout session that was related to the Department of Interior. Department of Interior, in common with many agencies, it's slightly fragmented and distributed in terms of where the management and the budgets are, and many businesses have enjoyed just finding a particular niche on one small aspect of an organization of the Department of Interior. As we start to look at cost drivers and setting up standards for quality and customer service, as we're increasingly looking at is how can we then allow small businesses to participate in what we're trying to do of delivering things from an enterprise perspective, and whether it's being delivered from the OCIO level or with the advent of cloud services. And what does cloud services mean for us? You know, there's a whole new variety of skill sets that are going to be needed to assure the delivery of cloud services. So in the past, where formerly we might have been focused on assets, as we move into a service orientation way of delivering types of services and what we more might have said is a commodity type of thing, is there's going to be a demand for what kind of skill sets do we need out there. And it's one of the challenges that we're facing and all that. Is it yesterday's newspaper, or how do we look at presaging what's ahead of us, and then inviting you all in to participate as we move forward.
I'm fond of yesterday's newspaper. Todd, do you want to weigh in from the CFO angle, the key challenges?
Yeah, I would say in the CFO community at large, one of our top priorities right now is to eliminate improper payments. I mean, we're going through tough budget times right now as a government, and the fact that we have billions upon billions of dollars going out the door that shouldn't be going out the door is simply unacceptable. That right now for VA is our top financial management priority, and we're looking for talent and tools that can help us kind of peel the onion on our improper payments and to figure out how we can use business intelligence, predictive analysis in order to get our hands around that and shut down those improper payments. Another area that we're challenged in right now, and I can't speak to other agencies, I don't know that this is government-wide, but at the VA about 8 months ago, the Secretary asked me to set up an enterprise risk management program at the VA. We're big, we're diverse, and the senior team, I think, just got to the point where it's kind of no more surprises. How do we set up a system here where people are identifying risk at the beginning of a project or a program and are managing that risk as well as the overall management of the project or program? And when you start to see trouble, let's elevate it. Please don't be a hero. Throw it up. Let the people above you and across the agency or department help turn it around or mitigate the risk to begin with. So again, we're out looking for talent in that area to help us establish an enterprise risk management program. And just to wrap this up, I think all of us here, no matter what your acronym is, CIOs, CFOs, CHCO, CAO, to me we all ought to be CVOs, and that is Chief Value Officers. I mean, everything that we do in these jobs should get to a bottom line, which is how can we create and increase value for both the department that we work for, the taxpayers who pay our salaries, and the beneficiaries out there in the American public who depend on us for their benefits and services.
Colleen?
Well, I will tell you, I was listening to this panel, and I'm quite impressed how tactfully they are talking about the budget. And the bottom line, folks, is that we got cut and we are broke, period. And looking at that, there are so many challenges across the federal government that you couldn't just pick one because they all impact all of us and our country. So when I look at the DHS, one of the main challenges for DHS is the fact that, we are trying so very hard to improve DHS's ability to deliver IT programs successfully. And that seems to be very difficult when you've had a young department come in and pull together 22 components, all of which have been working so very fabulously independently. And so when you try to pull those components together, of course you're going to have the mindset that this is mine, this is my turf, this is what I do. So the culture alone is a challenge on itself. But then we look at the programs that each and every one of those components bring to protect the homeland. And when you look at that, the first thing that we are, first of all, are trying to address are the skill sets of program managers and really making sure that we deliver on commitment. And many times you hear people say, I have PMP certification, I have been delivering systems for a while, I have 22 to 25 years of experience, but when they come into an environment such as DHS, we struggle because we're so disconnected in some cases and yet so connected in others because we have the same mission, and that again is to protect the homeland. So if I had to say anything, it would be improving DHS's ability to successfully deliver IT programs. The other part of that is that we have new technology coming in every day. You've all heard about OMB and their portfolio stat. And these are opportunities, or this is an opportunity for us to start looking at our infrastructure and how we're spending and how we're using that infrastructure, and are we leveraging what we already have. So the portfolio is to really identify what portfolios we have, and we have done that in DHS. We've looked at basically the capabilities across the department, and we've mapped 13 portfolios, of which we now look at several systems within that portfolio, and we realize that there's duplication across the board. And this is an opportunity for us to now leverage and have one system instead of having many implementing the same thing. In addition to that, we have the infrastructure spin that we are addressing. And, you know, email as a service. When we pulled all these 22 components together, we realized everybody had their own email. Now we have an enterprise solution where we're pulling everybody onto one enterprise solution, email as a service. The same with Workpace as a service. OneNet for our networks. So, and mobile devices as well. We need small business to help us with these initiatives because it's so important for us to manage our money during these times. Right now, Homeland Security has an IT budget of $6.4 billion in programs alone. And when we look at that and we're trying to figure out where's this money going and we're not delivering on commitment as we should, we start to think about and be smart about our spending by leveraging things that are already in the department, case management, our infrastructure, our cloud, private and public cloud. Things like that mean a lot to us. Do we have the skill sets to do it? Not in every component. But this is an opportunity for small business to touch base with some of these components and make this thing happen for us. Because protecting the border, we have ICE, we have Coast Guard, all of these components need assistance in making the enterprise work so that we're saving money and that we have significant efficiencies.
Well, following on the money theme, one of the ways that the government wants to save money is through strategic sourcing, using the leverage that the government has as a large volume buyer. And can you give us some thoughts on the strategic sourcing initiatives and GSA's role in them?
Sure, and VAs and DHS play very active roles in this as well. There's certainly a renewed emphasis on strategic sourcing across government, strategic sourcing being a very wonky term for just buying smarter. No one buys quite like the federal government. I'm sure none of your companies buy quite like the federal government. OMB released a memo in December 2012 from the acting director, Jeffrey Zients, really placing a renewed emphasis on this, creating what he's calling a strategic sourcing leadership council made up of the largest spending agencies, of which many agencies on this panel are represented. And there's a commitment to drive 10 new strategic sourcing solutions in the next 2 years, plus an additional 5. GSA's responsibility is to deliver 10 of those, and other agencies will deliver the other 5. This is fast for the federal government. GSA has some contracts in place already that have been successful, but they've done 3 or 4 in the last 7 years. So this is really a much greater effort across government. I think there's always concerns from the small business community around strategic sourcing. The OMB memo does clearly state that we have to maximize small business participation. In our office supplies contract that's already in place, 13 of the 15 vendors are small business. We increase the dollars going to small businesses as a result of that solution. And moving forward, all of our solutions, we will have that commitment. Again, we have built into all of our performance plans, including everyone doing these strategic sourcing solutions, that we have to meet or exceed the dollars going to small businesses. On each of our commodity teams, we have a representative from our Office of Small Disadvantaged Business. We have SBA on all of our commodity teams. And we have done, an analysis of the impact, and we have a commitment to meet or exceed the dollars going to those small businesses.
Okay. How about shared services? Colleen? It's a smart idea, often difficult to sell it to agencies. Sometimes I've heard very indirectly because the CFOs don't want to give up the budget, but we won't go there. But how about shared services as an opportunity for small business and for saving money?
Sure. Well, first off, with regards to saving money, I believe the federal government has already made significant gains in cost savings in the shared service arena. So those who have been in the IT arena for some time recall under Karen Evans' direction that federal government had to identify themselves as a service provider or consumer of key back office services, financial management, HR, payroll. That's been in place for quite some time now. So at Department of Transportation, we are getting our personnel and payroll services from my good friend over here, Bernie, in Department of Interior.
Every 2 weeks.
Thank you. But just listening to my colleagues on the panel, there's obviously still some opportunity here for additional cost savings, vertically and horizontally across the federal government. I was listening to Colleen mention, obviously with the breadth and scope of DHS, there's still opportunity areas for shared service solutions amongst her various component agencies. I think, I think there's a large room for small businesses to help federal government navigate towards cost-beneficial shared services in a whole, let's say, arena of areas. For example, once a shared service solution provider is identified, and I'm going to tell you that's no small feat in itself, because if you're, again, looking on the public side, just marrying up an agency's requirements with identification of who those providers are, what service offerings they are delivering, and oh, by the way, at what cost point, and just in terms of how they're dealing with requested enhancements and their customer service posture to their clients, really is key information that is necessary in picking the right partner for your shared service provider. An independent arm in terms of, or independent agent as a small business can help a federal agency look at the vast portfolio that is available to them. Once one is selected, definitely there's a lot of work associated with architectural analysis, program planning, project planning, transition planning, just ensuring even once you are obtaining those services that in fact you are getting what you're paying for as an independent consultant to the providing agent, to the receiving agency. So I think, there's quite a large space there for small businesses to operate within and really provide beneficial services to us.
Yeah, I just want to talk within the context of the Department of the Interior, is within the IT world, is we are constructing an internal shared services environment for commonly used type of IT type of utilities. And the construct of that shared services is to assure the delivery of the services. And where the actual provisioning of those services are, we are relatively speaking agnostic. So we will look at either whether interior shared service center providers or other government agency center shared services providers. I will state from the Department of Interior, we run a lot on a working capital fund type of model. So an example of an internal shared service provider that we have is we have a small company, Onyx, that happens actually is the shared service deliverer for our email system, which is Google. It's a Google email system, but they're providing services for 72,000 users. We're also doing the same thing in terms of electronic records management system that we have, and that is a small business, but that is in an internal construct about how we do cost sharing and cost reimbursables. That's an internal shared services provider.
Interesting. Do you want to add, Todd?
Yeah, just quickly on shared services. I've actually been in an agency where we provided shared services, and I've been on the other end of the stick of buying them. And right now, OMB is moving to a shared services model for financial systems. Mm-hmm. And I just think we got to make sure, as government as an entity, we don't kid ourselves as we go into this that it's a panacea. It's a lot of hard work to get it right. Things that Bernie and Interior are doing are good examples of how you can do it right. But when we talk about savings, I think as we move out on the financial systems front to do this, I don't necessarily see the savings coming from paying a cheaper rate per transaction than what we're doing ourselves right now. I think with financial systems, it's actually narrowing it down and having a few core accounting financial systems that work well, that everybody can go to and buy, rather than each of us out there paying $200, $300, $400 million over a 10-year period to replace the system that we have today. And I think the risk that we've carried in the past, the taxpayer money that we collectively have wasted in those failed efforts to replace financial systems is really where the lift is, and where the gain to the taxpayer is going to come out of this shared service approach for financial systems.
Okay. I want to talk about workforce, but I also want to...
And I'd like to just add a couple of things to that.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
You know, Todd, he brought up a great point about the shared services for financial systems. Having been the program manager on the task system, all of you probably have heard about it, and it's been canceled at least 3 or 4 times. And I came in at the end where it got canceled for the last time, and no one ever wanted to do it again. Having said that, I will tell you that we are now, from a DHS perspective, looking at the components and having a shared service provider, and Department of Interior is one of those areas in which we have been working very closely to just find out what they are doing. And in doing so, I will tell you that the concerns, you know, Todd expressed one concern, but another concern is to have a turnkey solution for all of the components in DHS, finding out that they still have some uniqueness. And what you don't want them to do, these components, is to then try to modify that shared service for their unique needs. So they have to learn to kind of bend to the solution. Some way, somehow, they have to do that. And not everyone is, you know, amenable to actually bending to the solution. So that's something that we need to think about when we want to go to shared services, is that this is how it is, and you try to pull in as much functionality as you possibly can that's going to meet several organizations or several agencies. And if it doesn't, it may not work for you. But to put hundreds of millions of dollars into a built or developed system is certainly not the answer.
Okay. I see we get agreement with that. I want to hit workforce, but if we've got questions, I'd like to give an opportunity. Yes.
This may be a good introduction to workforce. Last month, 10,000 federal workers retired, 10,000. And we're talking about commodities. I'm conflicted because that term, when you're on the business side of the equation, is not a good term. Okay, you're always trying to create a value proposition. You're always looking for value in your products. But here's the problem the government may run into. Records were a commodity, but iTunes is not a commodity. Books were a commodity. Amazon, who you're buying now cloud services from, is not a commodity. What's going to happen if you set a paradigm in place that says price is the only thing that matters with commodities, right, and there's no room for this expansion of technologies that will disrupt your business and create cost savings and efficiencies beyond imagination. And all that innovation comes from small business. And I really worry about this term commodities. Strategic sourcing could be adapted. I mean, that could be worked. But commodities, that's another story. That's my question.
No?
So the question part of it is how,
Deal with all these people leaving and the demand that you will have for greater efficiencies with commodity procurements in your rich base of innovators when you're driving them away from innovation by commodity contracts.
does anybody want to tackle that? I need some volunteers.
I will step out blindly in response to, I guess, when we look at cloud, and I'll just cite email as an example, all right? It is, one could say, oh, email is email is email, a rose is a rose is a rose. It is not quite there. It is where, however the email is being delivered or whatever we consider that inbox, and how do I do my chatting and how do I do whatever with the collaboration tools, it is a blend of a commodity and a service. And one of the things that we have to look at is not just the pure price points. Is this a great price point for whatever it is? We look at from the Department of Interior is I'll characterize it maybe like from a balanced scorecard perspectives. Is, you know, cost is one of the perspectives, but the primary perspective that we have is about the customer and the customer satisfaction with the use of a service / type of commodity activity. Then you're bringing up the point about where innovation is. And, you know, in the department, we're a distributed organization, so we're also blessed, and this sounds perverse, we're blessed by not having a lot of money, so people have to resort to a variety of ways and all that of seeing how can I do something better. And a lot of that occurs on our fringes. It doesn't happen in headquarters of the department. It happens in a bureau or a subcomponent. And one of the things that we look at is through the better communications tools is allowing an idea to be floated or to be aerated elsewhere and all that to see whether it merits consideration for delivery to a wider constituency than from where that particular innovation is. We're building in several different levels and all that innovation, whether it's a new capability or a new capacity, and then seeing where that's come. And that's one of the reasons why we like to work with small businesses and all that, because small businesses aren't generally hidebound. If I got that product and I got my points down, there is ideas and all that are coming out, so we look at that. Regarding where the workforce and the retirements of that is a lot of, we're going through a generational shift in terms of how government services are delivered and the way that they're delivered. So there's going to be this blend of some things we might see that could be out in the cloud, some things will be delivered in terminal, some will be a melange of new ways of doing things. And we're going to have to force ourselves to do new ways of doing things because the money is no longer there.
Colleen?
Just to follow up on that, I think we need a healthy balance in terms of opportunities and contracts between commodity contracts and those that are more on the innovative side, which really, if you think about it, the commodity contracts stretch our dollar, so we're not having to rethink and re-engineer things that are already proven technologies, and we can take that money essentially and focus it in on improving the execution of our mission via re-engineering our business processes, actually analyzing the data versus paying an inordinate amount of money on the platforms that our data is riding on. So those commodity contracts really are important, again, in maximizing our budget in the innovative area, because if it weren't for those contracts, obviously we would not be getting the price point that we are. But you're going to just see the focus change. I mean, you see a lot of opportunities and a lot of agencies focusing in on data analysis, business intelligence, predictive analysis. And so that's really, I think, where the focus is going to be versus on the iron and the hardware, that the data is running on.
I just want to answer your question about low price, because I heard that in a breakout earlier today with GSA. And I think that's a concern for a lot of people out here. Are we just going to go to low price in this tough budget climate? My background is in the state, at the state level, in the state of Pennsylvania. And the budget crisis hit states 15 years ago. And they have to balance their budget. And as Deputy Secretary of Procurement, for all of our service contracts, it was best value. And in fact, technical was always the biggest chunk. And yet, we were still driving hundreds of millions of dollars in savings. The two are not exclusive. You know, you can have best value and still drive lots of savings. And you have to be smart about it, right? There are some things that are definitely low price, no doubt about it. But there are other things where you know that it's incredibly high risk if you're just going to go low price, and you will pay for it later. So, you know, it's always a balance, right? It's just an assessment on every single one of these. And then, you know, your point about the diminishing workforce, again, we just have, you know, we have 16,000 contracts across the government for professional services. We have, you know, 800 different cell plans. If we could just streamline and you know, operate from more common platforms, we probably wouldn't need as many acquisition personnel as we have. And as people retire, we could probably do just as much.
I have a question up here.
It's a bit of a follow-up, your question about commodities and non-commodities. And that's establishing a common way to define the operating baseline. When you look at all the departments and agencies, and the ability to say, how is it that we derive core attributes that are common, thus there's a common operating baseline we can determine, and how that's determined. And then there's your mission unique things as well. But I've asked before about how is it that each agency department defines their operating baseline, thus their performance metric, which is the only way you can tell whether you're getting the savings or not, right? If you know what your current operating baseline is. But in order to measure apples to apples, there should be some way in which we can at least understand whether we do or do not have a common way of doing that across the entire government. So as we do go to things like shared savings and such, we know what that actually means. So that when there is an innovation, we know that it truly is an innovation or a transformation versus something that's just a commodity. You want to talk to that if you could, please?
I can take a first shot, but no, I mean, so you hit on a really big challenge that we didn't talk about earlier is data, right? Which kind of goes back again to the fragmentation. We all have tons of different systems within our own organizations, but you have to develop that baseline, not just to track and monitor the savings, but the data is going to inform your strategy, right, and tell you how to do it. And at Commerce, it was a pretty intense effort when we were doing strategic sourcing to dig through FPDS, and then every bureau had a slightly modified, tailored financial system, and then we dug into the contract writing systems, and everybody had a slightly different contract writing system, and an inventory system, and everybody had a slightly different inventory system. And it was a really challenging process, but we went through it, and in that discovered we had vastly different pricing. We could tell what it was we were buying. We knew what our baseline was. We were able to track our savings when we put the new, contract in place. But there's no easy answer to that. But it is doable. But you have to do it. But it is incredibly challenging now in the environment that we're in.
Yeah, I just want to bring up a quick thing. I'll do with the Department of Interior, but then from a U.S. government perspective and all that, as I think was mentioned, maybe you would have heard about portfolio stat coming out. It's as mentioned is that there is no baseline in the U.S. government for anything, and how to come to grips with.
I love that quote.
But we're trying to come to grips with that, and we're trying to come to grips with that in that we're trying to do an asset inventory of what we have. Now, within the Department of Interior, what are our authoritative sources of information? I can run through the personnel system and say I've got X amount of feds doing this type of activity. I can run through our procurement systems and say I got X amount of procurements doing this type of thing. I can use what we call the 53s or our exhibits that we submit to OMB about what we think we spend on procurements. Those are all authoritative sources of information, but they're all different views. But now I'm going over to our financial management side of the house and all that, because we have an integrated financial management system, and we're working with them on looking at getting into granularity of like resource codes, because we talk about like wireless plans. When you look at wireless plans, how many thousands are there throughout the U.S. government? Those calling plans are like $40 in one place, and they're $200 in another place. And it's for the same carrier. It's for the same service. And, you know, we're trying to come to grips with that. And one of the aspects within portfolio stat that we're looking at, and as, you know, whether it's through the data centers or through a lot of these types of activities, is coming up with the comparisons of where we're going. The administration is doing a pretty good job in terms of an emphasis on performance. And the emphasis on performance goes to seeing what we have and then establishing a baseline and starting up some parametric estimating about services that are being delivered in whatever that particular area it is.
I think part of the key there is what algorithm was used to derive that baseline. So the differences, right?
Okay, we're standing between the attendees and the networking, sometimes called cocktail.
Could I make
But
one
yes, you
comment?
can, and I'm going to, and then after that, I'm going to go around and ask everybody if you had one piece of advice to give the attendees to help them succeed. What would that be? But go ahead, Colleen.
Okay, I had mentioned the portfolio stats, and I had also mentioned portfolio reviews. And let me just tell you how DHS has addressed this, because we are trying to establish a baseline. And what we have is our chief architect who is doing a segment architecture. That segment architecture identifies portfolios based on capability. So, for example, TSA has screening. It has screening of baggage. It has screening of people. That's a portfolio for us. We have a law enforcement portfolio with all of the programs that implement some type of law enforcement effort. The same with infrastructure. We have an infrastructure portfolio that would address all of our infrastructure. What we have done is identified 13 portfolios within the department. And from there, what we're doing is we're looking at, for example, the infrastructure or IT commodity piece. We look at email as a service. We then look at how much CBP or ICE or Coast Guard or FEMA may be paying for email as a service individually. From there, we do benchmarking. So we go out to Forrester or Gartner, and we actually do the benchmarking and say, oh, it costs $7.54 for email. But yet we've got several components paying $20 or paying $50 for the same functionality. So what we do is we pull this together and say, we're going to put you on one email. This is what I call the as-a-service products. So it's email as a service. From that point, as we start migrating them to one email, we start to calculate what the savings would be. Okay, we are doing that for consolidation, for our data centers. We're doing it for email as a service. We're then starting workplace as a service. And then, as I stated before, OneNet, getting on one network. It's so important for us to do that because, as it was stated, we have to, from a portfolio stat perspective, we have to show that we can save 10% of our IT infrastructure spend. And we're spending $6.4 billion. So the OMB is looking at us and saying, well, okay, $640 million, you need to chalk it up. And what we're doing is trying to figure out where we can have those savings. We have other programs like geospatial, we have COP, we have several other programs that add to the savings, along with mobile devices. But what's important is that we have the portfolios in place, we leverage what is already there so there's no duplication. We have portfolio governance boards that actually manage those portfolios to make sure that when a program comes in and says, I want an email, we say, oh, we've got you covered. You don't have to go off and build your own a new email service. So it's really important that you understand, and that's key because it's a lot of work in DHS around the portfolios now.
Okay, thank you. So let's start down at that side with Ann. What one piece of advice would you give the attendees?
Professionally or personally?
Okay, that's a very interesting choice.
Believe in yourself. No.
Snow White.
Snow White. I made it in second grade. The Ji Young Park, who runs our Office of Small Disadvantaged Business, would say, respond to our sources sought and RFIs. Those allow us to make a case to set aside procurements for small businesses, so extremely important.
Okay, Bernie?
The message I'll have from this community is we're changing the way that we deliver IT services to the department and to how we deliver the department's missions to the American public. And the result's going to be, it's going to be a modern IT shared services organization. As we're transforming the way that we deliver the services and all that, we will continue, as we have in the past, to leverage small businesses to provide modern IT services in a cost-effective and customer satisfaction and innovative manner.
Colleen?
My advice would be, particularly for those small businesses that are just starting out, to find your niche. Particularly in the arena of IT, it's extremely broad. So there's a lot of work out there. Don't try to cover all of the bases. Go deep, build up your expertise in one or two areas. And I'm sure the past performance in terms of your portfolio will grow and then allow you to broaden out thereafter.
Todd?
I'm actually going to build off what Colleen said. I had something very similar to say, which is stick with what you do well. What is your core competency? What is your mission? Why do you exist? That's not saying don't grow and branch out, but I can't tell you how many meetings I have sat in throughout my career where people talk about, going out with an RFP or who do we go to or how do we do this, and small businesses mentioned, and there are just some people in the room who go, no, I need a big boy in here to do this. So when you stick with what you do well and you knock it out of the park, it gets remembered and it helps you. But every time you go for that bridge too far and an agency has a bad experience with a small business, it impacts the entire community and it feeds into that attitude that exists in some corners that we always need a big guy. That small business is a little riskier. So do what you do well and just be careful about expanding beyond that.
I totally agree with that. I would say I've had great success with small business. As a matter of fact, it's my preference for most of the areas that I cover over at DHS. But I will tell you, from a small business perspective, know your target. If you're going after an agency or a borough or a department and you really want to demonstrate your product, whatever that may be, understand the target in which you are going after. Understand what their needs are truly. Understand that environment, because understanding that environment gets you in the door, because you now understand their need and you can provide the product that will help them address that need.
Thank you. Can we give the panel a big hand?